All right, guys. So sorry about that. On your table of contents, I put page 74, and we're going to do factoring again. And today we're going to talk about difference of squares. So once you have that written in, if you want to go ahead and flip on over to that page, here is some. My camera is messing up. Here are some examples for you to go ahead and write down if you would like to go ahead and write those down. Okay, so today the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do some review on multiplication. Okay, so when I have x plus 4 times x minus 4, we're going to double distribute. X times x is x squared, and x times negative 4 is negative 4x. And then 4 times x is a positive 4x, and 4 times negative 4 is a negative 16. Now we're going to combine like terms, which means these two middle terms will go together. So I'm going to get an x squared. Those cancel each other, minus 16. Okay, for example 2, 5x times 5x is 25x squared. 5x times negative 1 is negative 5x. 1 times 5x is positive 5x. And 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Okay, so what I'm going to do from there is again combine those middle terms. So I keep 25x squared, a negative 5x and a positive 5x cancel, and I have minus 1. Okay, so the reason I reviewed these two type of problems is you notice that these binomials multiply together, get 4 terms, but the two middle ones cancel to leave you still with a binomial. That's what a difference of squares is. Okay, so we are going to work backwards today. We're going to be given a problem that looks like this, where they're perfect squares and subtraction, and we're going to come up with our factors. Now, difference of squares has a rule to it to where you don't have to show very much work as long as you're paying attention. So when you're doing the difference of squares, the rule is if it's a squared minus b squared, so both these numbers have to be squared, you're just going to open up two factors, and you're always going to take a plus b and a minus b. So you're just splitting it up into the perfect square. So in other words, like for 16, it'd be 4 and 4. Okay, now two things you have to make sure. It must be subtraction, and they must be perfect squares. Now, these notes are a little bit longer, so you're going to have to bear with me, but they do go by pretty fast. So when we're doing these, a squared minus 4, you got to look to see, is it subtraction? Yes, it is. And are these perfect squares? Yes, they are. Now, if you can't remember if they're perfect squares, you can always do the square root of whatever number you have, 4. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're just going to automatically open up two factors. You're going to make one a plus, one a minus every time. The a is going to split a and a because a times a is a squared. The 4, if you take the square root of 4, you get 2, so it's going to split to a positive 2 and a minus 2. Now, if you wanted to double distribute this, combine like terms, you should get back to that answer. So that's always a good way to check your answer. Okay, for number 2, this is subtraction. I'm going to see, which I know, but in case y'all need to, if 81 is a perfect square. Okay, 81 is a perfect square, so I'm going to open up my two parentheses. I'm going to put 1 plus, 1 minus. They're always plus and minus. 81 split with 9 and 9, and x squared will split x times x. Okay, you have to stay in the same order. Do not flip-flop your order today. Okay, for number 3, I have k squared plus 25. The first thing I check for is subtraction. This is not subtraction, so you cannot do this problem, so we call it prime. Okay, moving to number 4, 9b squared minus 100. This is subtraction, and the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 100 is 10, so this is going to work. So I open up my two factors. I put a plus and I put a minus. 9b squared, this will split with 3, and you also have to split the b. So you're going to put a 3b in the first spot. Now 100 split to 10, so we're going to have a plus 10 and a minus 10. Okay, 16a squared minus 121. Now, I'm going to quit doing the calculator for the square roots. If you need to do them, you do them. Okay, I know these are perfect squares, so I'm going to open up both of my factors. One's a plus, one's a minus. 16a squared, this will split to 4, and I have to split the a squared, so 4a. 121 will split with 11. If I double distribute, I should get back to that answer. Okay, 4h squared minus 25g squared. So now you're going to see two letters. Not a big deal. They are perfect squares, so you're going to open them up and put a plus and put a minus. 4h squared, well, we already know 4 becomes 2, so we're going to put 2h because we got to split the letter. And 25 becomes 5, so I'm going to put 5, and I got to split the g, so 5g. Now, if you double distribute, you'll get back to what you need to. Okay, so moving into 7 where you have two letters. Again, these still are perfect squares. Even 1's a perfect square. So we're going to open up both factors. One's going to be a plus, one's going to be a minus. Okay, the way you split x squared is x, and the way you split y squared is y. So we're going to have xy. The way you split 1 is 1 times 1. That's the only way 1 can split. If you double distribute, you'll get back to your answer. Now, moving to where you have a higher exponent than 2. K to the 6th minus 16. As long as the exponent is even, it will split perfectly, but you need to listen very carefully to this. If the exponent is greater than 2, you need to half the exponent when you're doing this. So we're going to put a plus and we're going to put a minus. I'm going to split the K, but now I have to split 6. So in order to do that, I divide it by 2, which gives me 3. Because remember, when you're multiplying, you're technically adding your exponent, so 3 plus 3 gives me 6. Now to split the 16, the square root of 16 is 4. For number 9, I have 121 r to the 6th minus 1. Again, I have a higher exponent, but both of these are perfect squares. So I'm going to put a plus, I'm going to put a minus. When you have 121, that becomes 11. R6, we got to half it, and so that becomes R3. So I have 11 R3, and then I split the 1 with a positive 1 and a negative 1. Okay, my last example is going to be 64m to the 4th minus 9n squared, and that's just this style. We have one more style to show you. So 64m4. I'm going to split 64. That's 8 times 8. I forgot my plus and my minus. Okay, m4. You got to half the 4, and that gives me m squared. Okay, 9n squared. I got to split the 9, which would be 3 and 3. And since it's a squared, we just go n and n. Now, if I double distribute, I'd get back to my answer. Okay, now I'm going to flip this over, and if you want to go ahead and write these few examples for multi-step, because you're going to have multi-step problems. So go ahead and pause and write those for me. When you're doing multi-step, the first thing you have to look for is your GCF, and then you're going to do difference of squares. So I taught this yesterday briefly, so if you were absent, here's the review. If you don't remember how to get your GCF, if you don't know your factors, go math, over to number, down to 9 to GCD, and hit enter. You're going to type in 24, 54, close your parentheses. My GCF is 6, so I'm going to divide both of these by 6, and that gives me 6. I can't divide out a letter because the letters aren't the same. So when I divide, 24 divided by 6 is 4, and I keep a squared, minus 54 divided by 6 is 9b squared. Okay, now I look at the parentheses to see if it's a difference of squares. It is subtraction, and those are perfect squares. So the first thing I'm going to write is my GCF. And then I open up my two factors like what we were doing on the front. One's a plus, one's a minus. 4a squared splits to 2a. 9b squared splits to 3b. Okay, so now, again, if you need to, you do math over to number. You want that GCD. You can type in 45 and 20, which should be 5. Okay, we're going to divide these both by 5, but since they both have a Q, we're also going to take out that smallest Q. So I'm going to write 5Q and open up a parentheses for when I divide. 45Q to the 3rd divided by 5Q. Well, 45 divided by 5 is 9, and Q3 and Q make a Q squared. Keep my minus. 20 divided by 5 is 4, and the Q's will cancel. Okay, so now this is subtraction, and they are perfect squares. So I keep my GCF of 5Q. I open up my two factors. One's a plus, one's a minus. 9Q squared will split to 3Q, and 4 will split to 2. Okay, Moving on to number 3, you have 136. So showing one more time in the calculator. If you go math over to number, down to number 9, do 100, do 36, and your GCF is 4. You're going to take out a 4, but since they both share a B, you're taking out B. So we're going to put 4B, open parentheses, 100B3 divided by 4B. This gives me 25B squared. Negative 36B divided by 4B gives me negative 9. Okay, now I got to see if this is subtraction in perfect squares, which they are. So I'm going to take 4B, open up two factors. One's a plus, one's a minus. 25B squared will split to 5B. 9 will split to 3. Okay, for number 4, this time I can divide out an 8. They don't share an x, but they do share a y. So when I divide out 8y, that leaves me with x squared minus 4y squared. Okay, I keep my 8y and I open up my two factors. One's plus, one's minus. X squared will split with x. 4y squared will split with 2y. For number 5, I just have letters, so I see I can pull out an M and an N. When I pull out MN, that leaves me with M squared. The N's will cancel. And then this becomes a minus 1. Because when letters cancel, there's still a number. These are perfect squares, so I keep MN. I open up my two factors. One needs to be plus, one needs to be minus. M squared will split with M, and 1 will split with 1. Okay, for your last one, you got 80 and 125. So here we go. Math over to number. Oh, wrong thing. Math over to number. You want number 9. We're going to put in 80 and we're going to put in 125. And that gives me 5, so I can divide out of 5. They both share an n, so I take n squared, the smaller n. And now I just do my division. 80 divided by 5 would give, oh wait, first write your GCF. That gives me 16, and I keep n squared. And then 125 divided by 5 gives me 25. The n squareds will cancel. So since these are differences and perfect squares, I open up my two factors. One's a plus, one's a minus. That gives me 4n, and this gives me 5. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know.